Hey guys, this is Butch from the Vintage Media Grading Podcast. And before we start, I just want to give a shameless plug to Vintage Media Grading. VMG is your source for grading, authenticating, and slabbing your precious vinyl records. In addition, we offer a host of other services, including cleaning and sticker removal, as well as soft grading, which is a way to get your albums graded, but still allow you to spin your records and listen to your tunes. Come visit us at www.vmgvinyl.com to place your orders, or feel free to contact us at info@vmgvinyl.com. Hope you enjoy the podcast.
Hello and welcome back to episode 5 of Vintage Media Grading, the podcast. I am Andrew Hoffman. I have here with me Butch Harwood and Chad Paul Brayman of VMG. We also have a special guest, Court Gebeau, founder of ComicConArt.com, and he's known as having the handle SuperTrout27 on Instagram, and he's a super collector. Welcome to the show, Court. Nice to have you.
Yeah, thank you. Happy to be here.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah, absolutely. So can you tell us a little bit, Court, about ComicConArt.com?
Yeah, sure. I always grew up as a collector. When I was a kid, I was really big into comic books. Back in 2004, I sort of stumbled into representing comic book artists for original art sales. Started it from scratch. I was living in San Diego at the time, which is why I named it Comic Con Art. I couldn't think of anything more clever than that. And it just, gradually grew over time. And then about 10 years ago, I started handling the agency side of things too, where I help them work with publishers, manage their deadlines and their page rates and all of that. And it sort of naturally dovetails in with the art sales, because if I get them a really good project and they're drawing, Batman or Spider-Man, then those pages are going to be really desirable to collectors, and I get to sell them, on the back end.
That's a sweet business model. So what is it about comics that really drew you to that part of the hobby?
It was just the first thing that I naturally gravitated to as a very young age. Actually, records were as well, but from a collector standpoint, going to my first comic book store, going to the first conventions and seeing all of these back issues and realizing that there was a lot more out there than what I was finding at the grocery store on the spinner rack. The cool thing about comic books when you're growing up in the 80s, comic books were everywhere. You could get them at the gas station, at the pharmacy, at the grocery store. And it was just sort of like the gateway drug to collectibles in a way. And it's sad to see now that comic books have sort of become a little bit more niche, where you have to seek them out and know about them in advance. It's not as accessible at a young age as it was, 30 years ago.
And vinyl.
What was your?
I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Drew.
I was going to say that vinyl is kind of looking the same way. You can go to Target and get an album, but then if you really start digging in, there's you can get Pink Floyd Dark Side of the Moon, for example. But then if you start digging into first pressings and multiple prints, then the variants start stacking up. And I noticed that in comic books as well. You get the different variants on the cover art and things like that. So,
what was your comic book series of choice, Court, when you were growing up?
The first one that I really was into was Amazing Spider-Man. And when I was back in 84 or 85, when the first black suit Spider-Man came out, I was 8 or 9 years old when that happened. That was the first comic book I ever paid more than cover price for, and it was $8. And that was King's Ransom when you're 8. But I still love that comic book. I see it, and it's just a wave of nostalgia.
Right. We had a ton of comic books growing up, but then they were all in terrible condition. And then I was a big baseball card collector, and once baseball cards got into the junk wax era, where every kid thought he had his college tuition paid for, turns out he had nothing paid for. you also I started thinking, oh my God, comics are going to be worth something. So all the comics I ended up buying and keeping in good condition are also completely worthless. Because I don't know if I don't know if the comic world has like a junk wax era like baseball card does, but I'm assuming it's about the same era that 1991 Fleer was putting out worthless baseball cards in.
They sure did, and I was victim to that. I was really big into comic books in high school, and in the early 90s, that's when Marvel's printing 1 million copies plus of Spider-Man #1 by Todd McFarlane. They've got 2 million copies of X-Men #1 or X-Force #1. Image is launching. And I made it's amazing some of the lessons you learn in life that you look back on, 30 years later. But I had a gorgeous copy of Giant Size X-Men #1, which was the first appearance of the new X-Men team. I mean, it was perfect. I mean, today it'd be at least a 9.6, maybe a 9.8. I had bought it for like $90. And I traded it for as many copies of Spider-Man #1 as I could get my hands on, and they're all worth nothing.
Yeah, I just gave my son all my comic books, and I pulled out my Spider-Man #1. It's that it's still in the bag, untouched. It's not untouched. I looked it up on eBay. I said, "This got to be worth something." Nope, worth nothing. And then the only other comic book I was like buying besides Spider-Man and The Punisher was Ren and Stimpy, which I was for some reason convinced was going to be worth something. And the first one came in a bag too, and I never opened that.
Yeah, that's when I learned the importance of scarcity, and also if it's manufactured as a collectible, it's not going to be collectible.
Exactly.
Yeah,
right.
I was just going to say that the only comic I was never too much. I was never really into comics, but the one I remember and buying was the Death of Superman. That one. Mm-hmm. Do you guys remember that?
Of course. Yeah.
Thinking that bag with the blood.
Yeah.
I remember thinking that was going to be super collectible.
Yep.
I don't know if it is or not, but
I'm guessing not. $50 book. It was amazing how hot it got as soon as it was released, but now it's probably not worth more than that.
Yeah.
I still remember
poor investment.
I remember being at the grocery store and I saw Black Wolf #1 from Marvel Comics, and I was like, man, I'm in like Flynn. I got a #1, and that whole series didn't go anywhere. But I did get the Venom #1 with the hologram front. I don't think that's worth a lot either, but I just never really did much with comic books. Gave my collection away to my friend, and I don't think he would give them back now if I asked for them.
Yeah.
Court, do you still have the original one that you bought when you were 8 of that first comic book?
Not the copy that I owned when I was 8, but I do have a copy of that book. Yeah.
I want to segue for a second because something you said actually is a great segue into collecting vinyl, and it's been Chad's mantra since I've known him. I got to tell you, I don't know if Chad told you this, but he had accumulated before COVID, arguably the greatest scarce non-major sports card collection in the world. I'm not kidding, like in the world. He was finding things that no one cared about. Really, nobody cared about. Like, who cared about a Japanese Andre the Giant card cut out of a magazine in 1976? And, cards of soccer players that basically people in Europe were just giving away. And Chad accumulated this huge thing. And he kept saying the whole time, don't buy, cards, don't go and buy, I don't know who was hot at the time, Matthew Stafford or Matt Ryan or something, rookie. Buy these cards nobody wants. And he was just trying to make a collection, but sure enough, come COVID, they flew up. Unfortunately, he sold them for pennies on the dollar.
Yeah, so I had a good sense of what would be worth money, but not good timing of when to sell it. But my thought was I could get the greatest athletes in these other sports, like Muhammad Ali and Pele and Messi.
WWF cards were before they were
Hogan right. The best of the best at a fraction of the cost of a baseball or basketball prospect or, Jordans and things like that were already trading at fair value. And my goal was to just get the best names in the other sports, not to really make money, just for something to do. And then sure enough, the things caught on, and now a lot of those things are super collectible. And I sold them too early. Like this Kelly Slater card I sold so it just sold for like 10 grand. I sold it for a lot less than that, but I think I bought 3 of them for like $5. So
I was doing a lot of the same stuff cards for the last 5 years, but 3 or 4 years ago, I got really big into soccer. I bought all the Pele I could get my hands on. I had one of the 5 highest graded examples of his best rookie. I did well on that one.
Which one? The titulares or the alpha?
Alifa Bolage.
Yeah.
I had a PSA 9.
Oh, wow.
And there are no pens. So yeah, that was a big card. And I timed it just right. I got my hands on it right before the spike. That was beautiful. I also did really well on tennis cards.
Yep.
Did really well on Serena Williams. Thankfully, her husband, who is what's his name? The Reddit guy. Alexis Ohanian. He's married to Serena, and he started buying up all of her cards, and I was more than happy to sell them to him.
Oh, nice. Nice.
That's awesome.
Net Pro cards for like $1 a piece of stars.
Yeah, I bought her first limited Net Pro. It was a print run of 2,000 copies. I bought 60 or 70 of them raw for like 30, 40, $50 a piece.
Yeah. Yeah.
I graded a bunch of them. I ended up with like 50 PSA 10s, and I was selling them for anywhere from $5 to $8 grand a piece.
Wow.
So that was a pretty healthy return. And now they're not worth nearly that much. The card market came crashing back down to earth. So thankfully I didn't hold too much stuff.
The mistake I made was doing that. I was just doing it for fun. And once I had one, I wasn't necessarily looking to accumulate many of them. And that's a big mistake where I should have done that. But like I said, the point was not necessarily to turn a profit. It was just to create a collection to really impress nobody other than probably Butch and my brother. Because at the time, nobody cared about cards. And even my kid and like his friends, it was like a nerdy thing. Nobody was interested. And then COVID happened. And then cards became popular with kids and popular again. And the shelves at like Walmart and Target were completely empty. And now I think that bubble's burst a bit, and those shelves now are the supply is back in line with the demand for the most part.
But you kind of opened the door for a lot of other collectors. So you were the first person to get a lot of stuff graded by PSA. Didn't you?
Yeah,
I did a lot of work on your own too.
I was not a PSA one of PSA's favorite customers for sure. I would definitely bother them with submissions and then give them specs and they would refuse to grade it, and we would go back and forth. The Ronaldo Mega Cracks, I wanted to get that graded, and it was never been graded before. I had an email from Panini customer support with all the details, the specs of the set, and they refused to grade it, and it was so frustrating. So hopefully, as VMG, we don't do that to our customers when we're trying to grade something. Now, segueing into records. Now, as complicated as cards are, records are exponentially harder when it comes to variants and things like that. And Court, you sent a sub to us recently that I have to say was really awesome. Really enjoyed seeing it, grading it. A lot of the things were on my want list. Actually, all of the things were on my want list, down to the specific variant that you sent. So
cool.
Some of them were, I mean, you brought it up in the YouTube segment that you did with PWCC, where you target the best of the best, and I definitely saw that in what you sent, and that's similar to how it created my want list. The Led Zeppelin, the Beatles, Please Please Me, and the variants that you had were, in my opinion, the best of the best. And if you're going to start a collection and you have a little bit of money now, those are certainly the ones to target as blue chip pieces that, if record collecting and the prices of records do what cards and video games and all the other collectibles do, these are the ones that are really, really you're going to get exponential growth on your investment. And I hate to say records are an investment because everyone collects for different reasons, but at the same time, if you buy something, it's nice. It's a nice feeling when it goes up.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I've always had sort of a weird approach to collecting. I have my favorite things, and I usually just go all in on that thing. So like we were talking about Pele's Alifa Bolliger rookie, like rather than collect every Pele sticker, for his career, I focused on his rookies, and I had like 9 Alifa Bolligers. Like it was like, I like this one. I'm happy to have several of them or whatever. And so I would always rather target my favorites rather than feeling like I need to build out a catalog for, a particular artist or athlete or whatever. And that's just always been the way that I've done it. Because I don't remember who I was talking to about the potential for hip hop in record collecting because of the popularity of hip hop, and they equated it to the demand for horror movies if you're collecting VHS tapes. Now, I don't collect VHS tapes, but I understand why horror would be this niche that people are like, yeah, I want that, And I certainly appreciate the impact of hip hop and the collectability of it, but I'm just not personally a hip hop fan. So that makes it harder for me to want to buy it. Like, I don't want to buy something just because it might be a great investment. I mean, there might be exceptions if there's a deal on whatever, but I used to be really big into fine art, and fine art is typically bigger. You have to hang it on the walls. It takes up space, right? So you can't just have everything that you want. And so for me, it could be art that I really love to look at, and it could be art that was a great investment. But if it didn't tick both of those boxes, I wasn't going to buy it. Like, I was buying it as an investment, but I was also going to hang it on my wall and see it every day. So I kind of approach collecting like that in general. Like with records, I know what I love. I definitely want to collect that. But if I can see why it would be a great thing to invest in, then I'm going to double down on that. And so my own personal niche is like, I love 80s hair metal. Love it. Like White Lion, White Snake, Warren.
White Lion.
Like all of it.
Talking to the right
White
guy.
Lion is White Lion is like my favorite album. Side 2,
Cinderella, like I don't care, like LA Guns, let's go, right?
Side 2,
I don't know.
Side 2 of Pride is arguably the most underrated side of any album ever. I never comes off.
Don't get me started on Vito Bratta. He's an incredibly
my God, he's an absolute.
Which always says that. Which always says.
That's me with Tom. That's my favorite guitar solo of all time. It's just
that's me with Tom Kiefer. Tom Kiefer from Cinderella is my 80s guy.
I just saw them a few months ago.
Nothing gets
for them.
We've all seen Winger. Nothing gets the VMG. Nothing gets the VMG guys going like the mention of hair metal. Drew, our resident audiophile. I don't know if he's as excited as we are about hair metal, but it's
absolutely. Like as far as audiophile pressing, Slaughter is redoing all their catalog with Kiss My Wax Records, and so I've been ordering those box sets. They autograph every single one. It's really cool, and So no, hair metal is really. Now, does Steel Panther count though?
Oh, I love Steel Panther. All right, let's just go completely off the rails here.
Sure.
When I lived in San Diego, Steel Panther played there once a week. Mm-hmm. And at the time, they were called Metal Shop, and they were just a cover band, but they were a big deal. And there was a line around the block at the Typhoon Saloon in Pacific Beach every Wednesday night to see them. I can't tell you how many times I saw them. One day, they were selling their very first CD, self-released CD. It was called Hole Patrol. And they had T-shirts. And the T-shirt on the back, every single week they played the same 3 shows. I think it was Phoenix, Arizona, LA, or Vegas, one or the other, I can't remember, and then San Diego, and they just did the same circuit every week. And on the back of their T-shirt, they had this massive tour list, right? 20, 30 cities. Every single one said canceled, except for those 3 cities, which said sold out, sold out, sold out.
Nice.
And I had that CD, Hole Patrol, in a box in my closet for years. And one day I pulled it out. And I'm like, I wonder what the deal is with this. I looked it up on eBay. It was selling for $200 or $300.
Nice. Yeah. So
Satchel sold it to me for $10 at a show.
It's funny you say that because I actually more equate, and I've said this before about VHS horror collectors. I actually equate them more with heavy metal collectors because they are the same. They have that same niche where they are very obsessed with what they collect. and they are very protective of what they know, and they're very interested in the not only the most classic things that everyone's heard of, but the kind of groups and bands, and then movies on VHS's side. So I actually think metal, and a lot of that metal stuff is worth a lot. I just went to, my son's in a band, and I just went over the house of the drummer, and I was just walking in the living room, and he had just like shelves full of metal albums from the 80s, and he was like, I can't believe some of these are worth like $300. I was all pumped to have them.
And metal's super collectible. It's almost like punk in how collectible it is in low volume pressings.
Yep.
And the artwork is so great. Like,
oh my god,
you get those Poison front covers and
the Ozzy front covers, Dio. I mean, they're fantastic. Obviously, Iron Maiden front covers are works of art, of course. But
Iron Maiden, that's on my want.
Yeah.
One of my pickups in the Hollywood show was actually Look What the Cat Dragged In promo.
Nice.
Not exactly a Grail piece, but it was
nice.
Little Skid Row.
Run the wrong way, yeah.
Yeah,
minty fresh.
Yeah.
I have that album sealed. Sadly, it came. It was one of the first ones I bought, and it was before I realized I had to check to see if it was a club issue or not when I ordered them on eBay, and it was a club issue. I've had a few in the beginning when I was first. I'm unlike Chad. I am very just collect what I liked as a kid. Now I want the best one of everything I liked as a kid, but like my collection is really, there's not much hip hop. There's a little Chronic and early Eminem and stuff, but most of it's 80s and 90s and 70s, 80s, 90s rock, and then just finding the best version of each of those, generally usually sealed.
Yeah, Slave to the Grind is at the top of my wish list for a sealed copy. I don't even know what the story is with that. I can't find a single U.S. I mean, I don't even know if they pressed it. Like Discogs, the information there sometimes is unreliable. I know there's like a German pressing, but I don't know. That one's frustrating me.
Well, for someone who is just starting out with collecting vinyl, Court, what advice would you give them in terms of building a high quality collection, but finding good deals? Like what have you done in the past without giving up your secrets, so to speak?
I might have actually mentioned this to Chad the other day. I move around from collectible. I typically have a 5-year life cycle on whatever I'm collecting because I go all in and then I burn out, and I've probably reached the pinnacle of what I initially tried to accomplish, and then I get bored, and that's what happens.
Yep. Same here.
And so I've been in all these different, I did cards, I did comic books, I've done comic art, I've done fine art, I did Absolute Vodka ads while I was in college, made some money on those. Who knew, all these random things with vinyl. And actually this is true of all of these different areas, but I see it more in vinyl. Learn first and then buy. Like the learning curve on vinyl is so steep because it seems like every single album has its own set of rules. Like how do I tell that this is a first pressing? I actually, since I've been into the Beatles lately, some albums are easier than others. Some are really a struggle. I had to order this Beatles American Records Guide by Perry Cox, like an expert or whatever. It's been out of print for like 16 years. It cost me $300, but it tells you like what color should the inner sleeve be? What should the RIAA number be on the bottom right corner? Like, are there any disclaimers? Like every single album seems to have a thing, right? So like one example, Sgt. Pepper's, the first U.S. pressing of Sgt. Pepper's, every subsequent pressing on the bottom right corner has a reference to Macklins, which is a publishing company or something like that. And then at the same corner running vertically down the side is a reference to NEMS, which I believe is North End Music, something or other. It was like Brian Epstein's publishing company or something. But on the very first pressing, those two notations are omitted from the sleeve. It's like, okay, well, if I'm looking for this album, I have to look for this. And I'm looking for this album, I have to look for this. So if you want to get into high-end collecting, please do your homework. I mean, we were talking about all of these auctions that ended at Heritage over the weekend. And some of the sales were so mind-boggling because if you're like, well, that wasn't a first pressing and it just sold for a couple $1,000s or
right.
Like,
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's really the difficulty of collectors who collect sealed stuff, because there is tons of sealed vinyl that you can't tell it's a first pressing unless you open it.
Right. They never changed. The company would just use the same thing. We actually talked to the owners of Skunk Records because we were trying to track down the results of, a year for a Sublime record, and it was sealed, and they told us what is true of a lot of things. When we did re-releases, or when they did re-releases, they just printed out on the exact same. They still had the same files saved. They just printed it, so the re-release looked exactly the same. And so you get all these '70s albums where a lot of them are identical. I mean, like Jimi Hendrix. Are You Experienced is basically identical from 1967 to 1979.
Yeah, it's impossible. It's impossible to tell that one.
I liken it to an archaeological dig. Like you need to look at all of the clues that are available, and you can only just narrow it down, right?
Yeah.
Right.
But like another example, and there's so many albums that are like this, but Fleetwood Mac Rumors, they used the same jacket on that album for at least 6 or 7 years.
Right. Yeah.
And the funny thing is, like, obviously a hype sticker will help. A price sticker might help if you know what the retail price should have been at that time, but that's a little bit more iffy. But the evolution of a price sticker is very interesting. So for Rumors, for example, Go Your Own Way was released as the first single months before the album came out. When the album first came out, there was a hype sticker that says features Go Your Own Way. Shortly after that, they released Dreams, and you can find copies that have a hype sticker that say features Go Your Own Way and Dreams. Well, that came out a little bit later, right?
Right.
And then there's another version that says, winner of best album of the year for the Grammys. Well, that came out a full year later, but at least those are still all early copies.
Right.
But you can sort of follow the progression of the album, through the singles releases and the sales. You just need to look at
That actually reminds me a little bit of the Appetite for Destruction one we just talked about a couple of days ago, where they put it out in '87 with the Robert Williams paint art cover, and then they stopped distributing that one and changed it to the tattoo cover. But then in 1988, the movie Deadpool, which didn't even start filming until March of 1988, comes out with Welcome to the Jungle and Sweet Child of Mine in it. And Geffen re-releases the 87 cover, which was supposedly not released after 87, with a sticker on it that says, Deadpool featuring, as seen in featuring
a Deadpool hype sticker.
A Deadpool hype sticker, which couldn't possibly have been done in 1987. They didn't even start filming the movie until 1988.
So a lot of this is just educated guesswork. I mean, there's some margin for error. I mean, is it possible that Geffen had leftover sleeves and they were going to try to just push the rest of them out? Is it possible they already knew that Sweet Child of Mine was going to be featured in this movie?
And the record itself is probably a first pressing. The pressing of the record is the same if you opened it. It's just the height is different, basically.
It's hard to believe they would go back to press on a jacket that they were planning on discontinuing. Like that doesn't really, like, if anything, maybe they just had surplus or something.
Stop.
Right.
Oh, they didn't really
no, they just let it run its course, and then the nice thing with the Beatles, though, is they are so heavily collected and so well researched, and there's so much information out there. Those are ones that are actually a bit easier to identify and pinpoint all of the little tells that you were mentioning, like the numbers on the back that will identify what plant they came from. And there's so much information about the Beatles. That one is we're not really breaking ground or researching, is just knowing really where to go to get the right information. Some of these other ones are far more complex, where you're really writing the research book yourself by, like, MF Doom was one that we just went through, and I'm not an expert
on the label on that one.
Yeah. and learned a lot. And luckily, the label was cooperative to give us a lot of information. But to your point, you said earlier, Discogs is good. It's a good starting point, but it's certainly not 100% accurate, or you really can't stop there. You really got to go the extra mile in a lot of cases.
And a lot of times it's just as easy as, which we do a lot, is just email the record company, or find out if it's an older record, find out who bought the rights to those records and email them. They usually get back to you in less than a day, and they'll tell you exactly what it is. Just the other day, that just happened. I sent something and said, this says this was originally released in 85, but this looks like a repress. When, what year was it released? And they came back and said it is repressed, but it was 85. So 85, good. And then that's part of what, we've kind of decided. We kind of decided to go after the labels similar to PSA does, which is just describe what it is. And like PSA does not put rookie card on the label. They just say 1980 Topps Rickey Henderson. And so because, it will just describe everything we know about that label. And then the consumer can decide everything we know on the label. And then the consumer decides if that's something they want, rather than trying to guess as to, peculiarities that are not objective.
Let me ask, as a consumer, Court, what is your opinion of that? Like, is that something? What do you think? What do you think of that?
I think that, first of all, you should not ever guess or just go with like I'm 90% positive. Like when you're doing something that's supposed to be completely objective, then you need to be limited strictly by what you know. And so I think if you can determine that something is definitively a first pressing, then saying first pressing is great. I mean, as a collector, everybody wants their slab to say first pressing on it. That can only help the value. If you can't say first pressing, but you can say early pressing, that's still, and you give a date range, that's good. But I would stick to, like, this is what we can tell you. And so Dark Side of the Moon can be really tough to date. And my understanding of it is that the true first pressing, the hype sticker that says Pink Floyd Dark Side of the Moon on it, the true first pressing does not say made in the USA on the sticker. And every subsequent pressing, that either the color changed or it says made in the USA, or the made in the USA is always on there. But I've seen them graded where it says like 73 to 75, and that's still good because it's saying, okay, well, this is still a very early pressing. And to some collectors, that's going to be fine. But if it's a first pressing, then that only adds value. There was another example like that. I have a copy of Meet the Beatles, which came out in 1964. And one of the tells on early Beatles albums is the color of the inner sleeve. And if you tap a sealed record so that the sleeve, comes up to the edge of the jacket, you can see the color. And the very first early pressing in 1964 had a dark blue inner sleeve, and Capitol changed the color of the inner sleeve in late 1964 to light blue, and that only ran into 1965. So mine has a light blue inner sleeve, and it's labeled as early pressing, late 1964 to 65. And that's great. That's exactly what it is, And sometimes, the downside is really these albums. Like, one that frustrated me to no end was Black Sabbath, Master of Reality. I absolutely love that album. The cover's incredibly cool. It's incredibly condition sensitive because it's completely black and it's embossed. That's kind of tough to keep in nice shape. I would love a sealed first pressing of that. Unfortunately, the jacket stayed the same for practically a decade.
Right.
So when I finally found a sealed copy that had a promotional use only sticker, I was like, hell yes, this is what I've been looking for.
Right. So that was a lot of the reason why we kind of obsessed over making sure that we could display the vinyl in our with our cases, was because we didn't want to limit ourselves to just sealed albums, and we we actually think for a lot of those 70s albums, I actually think, I mean, this has nothing to do with being a VMG co-founder, but if I was just, wanted, if I was a big Fleetwood Mac fan, I probably would want, or Dark Side of the Moon fan or whatever. And I'm looking at, making a Dark Side of the Moon collection. I'd probably want it open. If all the albums seem to look the same and Jimi Hendrix Are You Experienced looks the same for 12 years, it might be that I'd rather have it open so I could see what the matrix code is and see if that's, the earliest pressing. And it may be that certain albums are actually going to be more collectible open than they are sealed, simply because, it's like opening a pack of baseball cards. What do you have?
Yeah. And I think I agree with you, Butch. And there's some albums, so like Live Like a Suicide there's not a lot of variants of it. That's a good one. If you can find it sealed, I haven't seen one sealed, but if you find one sealed, that's a one I think that sealed that's one you don't want to open. Mm-hmm. But some of the other ones, if we get into your sub a little bit, Court, you really have to open them to know what you have and the specific. The things that make them so collectible, like the Beatles one, that one is all about the label, not so much the cover, where the Led Zeppelin one is really all about the cover. Those were two awesome pieces that really are the best of the best of two of the all-time greatest bands. And if we want to get into...
Yeah, let's talk about one of those in a little bit more detail.
Sure. Let's go with the Beatles, I guess. The other thing that's fascinating to me about the Beatles is that their American catalog is completely different from their UK catalog.
Yeah.
Because in the UK, they would release singles and they would never include those singles on the albums. Mm-hmm. So there are all hit songs that wouldn't be on the albums, and the US was like, well, we gotta get those on an album. And so they'd reconfigure the track listing, or they would put together a compilation album like Yesterday and Today or whatever, where it's a collection of singles and B-sides and whatever. But the first album in the UK for the Beatles was Please Please Me, which came out in 1963. That was never released in the US. Some of the songs were probably repackaged somewhere else. And when it first went to press, I mean, obviously mono was the flavor of the day. Basically, everything was mono. They eventually did a stereo pressing almost as an afterthought. So the print run was super low. And the original Parlophone label, which was referred to as black and gold, very, very quickly got changed to the more modern label with the Parlophone name in white across the front. And so it was like this perfect storm of the stereo already being much more limited than the mono. And then you've got the black and gold label on it, which had a very short lifespan. It's considered to be one of the rarest, most desirable Beatles albums. And then you factor in the fact that it was their first album, and it's kind of a very big deal, I guess. And the thing that I find interesting about it, I have it over here somewhere, that makes it even more condition sensitive is the way they did the back covers. So the back cover for this album, they had these, let's see it, these folds on the edges where they have flaps on each side that fold over.
Yep.
And it was very, very easy for them to get caught on other albums or whatever. So you find a lot of copies of this album where the fold is torn or folded down or whatever. So finding a clean back cover, also a big deal. And this is a perfect example of why I think the hinged cover can be so cool. It's like, if you have a variant like this where it's all about the label, don't you want to see the label?
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. For our listeners, just a shameless plug. Court is holding up his VMG hinged Beatles album and showing us, and boy, does it look good! I gotta say. Anyway, continue.
Pretty.
Yeah, looks beautiful.
And there's a lot of albums like that. The first pressing of Nirvana's Bleach was on white vinyl, and they only did 1,000 copies of it. They quickly went back to press, did a second pressing of 2,000 copies in black vinyl, but the sleeve is exactly the same. They changed the sleeve after that, but if you've got that album, you can't tell from looking at it whether it's the first white pressing or the second black pressing.
And you also can't tell if it has the poster in it, because not all
correct.
the white ones had the poster in it.
Right.
Yeah, not even all of them had the poster. It was
I would like to know
hit or
what the
miss.
story is with the poster. The rumor that I heard was that the album was first sold at a sub pop festival called Lame Fest in June of '89, which actually was a week or two before Bleach was shipped to stores, right? So it's actually before the release date, but they made them available at the show. If you got it at the show, it had the poster in it. Otherwise, they didn't. That's what I've heard. I've only heard that from one source. If that's true, that's very cool. But yeah, getting the poster. If you have a graded copy of Nirvana Bleach and it says first pressing white vinyl, is that good enough for you, or do you want to see the vinyl?
I want to see if it has the poster too, and I want to see the vinyl.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, but I'm saying if it's already an open copy, but it's in a slab, and it's inside the jacket, like, okay, it's great. It says white vinyl, but I'd kind of like the vinyl,
Chad taught me something about that also, in that the white vinyl Bleach often would have little black smudge marks on it, almost thumbprints. Because when we were grading it, I was like, this says Chad, who is a Bleach obsessive. He is so obsessed with Bleach that you may wake up one day with him at the foot of your bed, just standing, staring at you, and asking you to talk about Bleach. Which is funny, because if you ask Chad, honestly, you give him a serum to make him, be honest, and said, Chad, what do you believe is the worst musical album ever written? You know what Chad's answer would be? He can't stand Bleach. He can't actually stand the music at all. He cannot stand it. He can't stand punk. He doesn't like it. He doesn't like that style that they're
really blowing my cover here, exposing me as a huge poser. But he loves the Bleach album. I love Nirvana, but the Bleach album, it maybe, I don't know what it is. I can't explain it. Maybe the obsession with like rookie collections, and I've always wanted Bleach, and then you take it a step further. I want the white one, and then another step further with the poster. That's the best of the best for, I think, those two albums right there. Please Please Me for the Beatles. That's without any gimmicky things that there's a lot of other Beatles albums that are super collectible. That one is just pure first press, UK release, their first album, limited. It hits all the high points for me. I think that's the one to get. And then our generation, the whole grunge era, if there's an album to get, without a doubt, that Bleach album checks all the boxes: scarcity, uniqueness, pop culture appeal. It's awesome. It's so awesome. In fact, Court submitted it, and I was like, please let us slab the poster. I just want to do it, and if you don't like it, we'll crack it out and slap it without the poster exposed. But I just thought that was so cool, and I think it's like a cornerstone piece. If anyone has a record collection, that's one to certainly get.
Yeah, I have a few comments on that. I've had at least 3 copies of Bleach on white vinyl, and they all have the same black smudge. I haven't checked to see if they're in the same exact place, but it's definitely on every single one of them. It looks like a thumbprint almost. Regarding your disdain for Bleach as an album, oh my God.
Yeah, I know a lot of guys.
To be fair, it took me a long time to warm up to Bleach, because obviously my first exposure to Nirvana in 90, 91, 92 was Smells Like Teen Spirit, and it lit my hair on fire. I vividly remember to this day watching their performance on Saturday Night Live when I was 17 years old, and I was like, "Oh my God, my world just changed." And grew up on hair metal. I'm like, this is different. And I became obsessed with them, and I love Nevermind, and I think it holds up tremendously well. I love it as much today as I did then. But to be fair, Nevermind is the outlier, and I don't even think Kurt necessarily loved it. Like, Butch Vig's production of it made it more accessible, smoothed out the rough edges a little bit. And that's why I love it so much. But I think if you want to say like which album is most reflective of who Nirvana really was or who Kurt Cobain really wanted to be as a musician, you look at Bleach and In Utero, and those two albums are much more similar sonically than Nevermind. Nevermind's the outlier. That's what's crazy to me. I would have loved for In Utero to be more like Nevermind.
Yeah, right. In Utero is basically a middle finger to all the posers that started liking their music because of Nevermind. I mean, he basically, just decided he was going to fill that album with completely inaccessible songs.
I'm going to be as abrasive as humanly possible.
Right, that were not pop friendly and drive away anybody who was, just an MTV fanboy.
Yeah, even Unplugged, they purposely didn't play singles on Unplugged. Unplugged is half covers. And non-singles for the most part.
The Unplugged album, they have a song from Bleach on that, right? I think the
about a girl.
Yeah, the only Bleach songs that I would reckon that I actually were from the Unplugged album, which was in the CD player a lot back in '95.
Very cool. So, Court, from your perspective, do you see any similarities between collecting vinyl and collecting other categories, comics, cards, or whatever categories that you enjoy?
Well, I see similarities in trying to basically transition my approach to collecting. So if I am collecting rookie cards in sports or first appearances in comic books, what's it about vinyl that's going to be, the most desirable, or what's going to grab my attention? And actually, it's a similarity and a difference. So I'm still trying to go for like, if the rookie card is the best card for an athlete, what's the best album for this band? But it's not necessarily, and often is not, their first album, right?
Right.
So going back to Nirvana, no one would say Bleach is their best album. Most would universally say that Nevermind is their best album. So Nevermind might end up being very much more collectible, even though Bleach is rarer. So that's very much a case-by-case basis by band. Another band that I'm huge on is Motley Crue. I just adore them, and no one would say Too Fast for Love is their best album. I would argue Shout at the Devil is their best album, or maybe even Kickstart Dr. Feelgood. But with music collecting, it's more about what was the most popular release by this band. And then rarity comes in as a secondary concern, I would say. But I would always lead first with, what does everybody have the most nostalgia for?
Yeah.
And then what's the most collectible format for that?
Yeah, Chad and I were actually having the same conversation because we were talking about the recent Heritage auction, and we noticed a pattern of the more easily recognizable albums were the ones that were driving the higher prices, and that's just because that's what's accessible to most people right out of the gate. So the Pink Floyd Dark Side of the Moon, the Butcher cover, the Nevermind, those are the ones that people are going to recognize, and they're the ones that they're going to want to have as the keystones in their record collection, whether it be slabbed or what they listen to.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I was thinking about that because, if you look at the way baseball cards worked, when grading was just starting to really get popular, you saw obviously Mickey Mantle rookie, Joe Namath rookie, and Michael Jordan 86 Fleer were super high value. But you would also see these kind of somewhat common cards, common in the fact that a lot of people had them, not common. They were still Hall of Fame superstars that when they first started getting graded had really high values. Kobe Bryant, 1997 tops, or 90, what is he, 96 or 97? 96. Kobe Bryant, 96 tops was going for, like, PSA 9 was going for over $1,000, $1,500. Of course, what happened over the course of 2 to 3 years is that everybody got that graded, and all of a sudden it flooded the market, and now it's down to $100. Whereas the oddball cards, I just sold a Ricky Henderson 1989 tops double header card for $200. It's literally this little piece of paper that sticks. It's nothing. But it's incredibly odd. So it sells, whereas Kobe Bryant rookie PSA 9 now sells for $100. And I actually, right now, because things are just getting going, you're going to see those high prices for the super valuable stuff. And I think that's going to keep happening. And hopefully it keeps happening. And hopefully people keep, getting into the hobby and getting their stuff graded. But I think there will always be a market, and it might be later for the rarer stuff. Because when people start to realize, geez, there's only one of these graded, there's only two of these ever graded, that ends up bringing the value up to things.
So, I agree. I agree with that, Butch. And one of the things that I find, I've gone back and forth on, I don't know what's going to be more collectible. Is it going to be the best album or the most popular album of the band, or something else that's some rarity or early album on an independent label, things like that? I've ended up kind of getting into both. Get the album that has that nostalgia for me, and then also take it a step further and say, like Green Day, for example, like Dookie's the album that we grew up on, but their early releases with 39 Smooth and Kerplunk were not commercially successful in much more limited releases. So I'm thinking to myself, Green Day, millions of fans, some small, relatively speaking, independent release that's scarce. Over time, I think those things will be collectible. But who knows? We don't have a crystal ball.
No.
Where I was good, some albums though, like Led Zeppelin's three of their first four albums, all have super unique things about them that make them very collectible. Led Zeppelin, the 1, 2, and 4. 3's collectible, but I don't know. I can't think of anything off the top of my head that makes 3 kind of jump off of the version to get. But the Led Zeppelin 1, the turquoise front cover, is Led Zeppelin's first album. That's it's a first pressing, UK, the country that they're from. Awesome album. And that to me is a great record. And that was another one in the sub that I was super, super stoked to see. Laminated sleeve, awesome condition. That one is also very high on my want list. And then if you go down the line, the hot mix on Led Zeppelin 2, which makes it unique, and Led Zeppelin 4, silly why I want it. I can't explain it, but I want the plum label with the inverted feather on the Led Zeppelin 4. And those are all massive albums with some unique little thing about it that makes it it's an early or first pressing, and it's a finite release, so it's somewhat limited compared to the millions and millions that they sold. To me, it has real legs from a collectability standpoint.
Mm-hmm. Or I just wondering, not to change the subject, but I want to go back to your love of Motley Crue. Have you by any chance seen the YouTube video of Kickstart My Heart, maybe from a couple years ago, and Vince Neil's attempt to sing it, and he doesn't know any of the words? Have you seen that?
No, I have not.
You got to check it out. Just YouTube Kickstart My Heart live. Vince Neil doesn't know the words. Somebody videotaped it and then attempts to put subtitles to what he's singing because he clearly doesn't know any of the words.
It is kind of sad.
It's the best video. Just the way the guy subtitles it, it's hilarious. It's fantastic. I mean, it's an indictment of Vince Neil, but it is a great video, and it's a high recommend. It's very highly entertaining.
The art just skipped over what. Sorry, Drew. We kind of just skipped over what Court mentioned. Too Fast for Love, which is maybe the most collectible hairband album out there. The original Luther pressing of Too Fast for Love was super limited before they went to the major label, and even the pressing, there's 2 kind of early pressings, and the first one's super valuable, probably the most valuable hairband album out there.
I absolutely love that whole story about Green World distribution and how they self-released it and all of that. And there's actually a really good YouTube video about that as well, which explains all of the variations. But yeah, there were actually 3 different, and they actually had a couple of Frankensteins, like if they had a sleeve and an older inner, and they put them together and whatever. But there were basically 3 different versions of that album. The very first pressing has the name Motley Crue up in the upper right-hand corner, and everything is black and white. And they pressed 900 copies of that. And then the second pressing, they changed the name to being in red and white. And I believe there were 2,000 or 3,000 of those. And they also, on the back of the jacket and on the inner sleeve of the first pressing, Vince has this ridiculously big hair. And when they went to the second pressing, they airbrushed it to make it look a lot more natural. And then they added sunglasses to the back cover. And then the third pressing is basically identical to the second, except for the labels on the record are black instead of white. So those are all of the Leather Records variations before they went to Elektra. And the first pressing was at the top of my wish list for the longest time. Super hard to find. I mean, there aren't any on Discogs. No one's asking, 10x what it's worth, which is what you often find on Discogs. Mm-hmm. There were none on eBay, whatever. And then I found a listing on Heritage. And the craziest thing, like I thought it would go super cheap because Heritage did such a poor job listing it, right? Mm. The lead image was of the back of the jacket because it was signed by all 4 members. And I thought, okay, well, that's cool. It's assigned Too Fast for Love. Who really cares, right? Right. Thankfully, I clicked on it and looked at it, and I'm like, oh my God. The second picture was like, this is a true first pressing, only 900 copies. It's got a clipped corner, but the condition is just insane. Like it looks like it was never played or touched or whatever. And I'm like, okay, I have to have this. I'm going all in, And I was really hoping I'd get it cheap. I did not get it cheap, but I love that album so much.
It's an awesome pick, and that one's also on my want list. I've been looking for the first pressing, haven't seen one, and when they do come up, you're not kidding. They go, unsigned. You're looking at $7,000-ish, depending. Yeah.
There was an absolute beater POS copy that I saw that somebody listed at $2,000. This is maybe like 6 months ago, earlier this year. Listed it at $2,000, been her best offer. Somebody snatched it up immediately, relisted it, and ended up getting like $4,000 for it. And it was in just beat condition.
Mm-hmm. You just don't see it. And when we were in Austin, and we're flipping through going through boxes of records, I stumbled across this, and I was like, "What? How much?" I'm like, "What is this doing in this box of?" And it's the second pressing, not the first. But needless to say, it was, and the condition is. It's okay. It's not mint by any stretch, but just finding one, getting one, and it was a fraction of the cost of the first pressing, but it was one I had to get it, and I was super excited about picking it up. But the first one is, to your point, just that's very high on my want list, and it's right up there with, if you're starting a collection and you are of our generation. I think it's a must-have. It checks all the boxes. Again, it's rare, it's limited, it's an iconic band, it's a cool cover, it's a cool story. It's awesome.
Yeah, and the track listing is actually a little bit different too. I think there's an extra track on it, and so it's fun if you're actually going to spin it.
Court, do you spin your records? Do you have a collection that you listen to?
That's actually how I got back into records first, is about 5 or 6 years ago. I just started getting back into records as a consumer, just to listen to them. Yeah. And I wasn't really spending a lot of money on anything. I mean, I remember there's a local record store here in Nashville called Grimey's. That's actually kind of a big deal. They've been around for a long time, and they get a lot of bands to play and stuff. Like Metallica played there once. Like, I mean, they're pretty big in the indie record store world. and they moved locations. And on their grand opening in the new location, I found a copy of Live Like a Suicide in a bin. It was not cheap. It was like $150 or whatever, and it was not in great condition. But that, at the time, was a massive splurge for me. I didn't really pay up for vinyl. I just wanted to listen to it. But then, being a natural born collector, eventually it was just going to take over, and it did. And so now, a lot of times I'll have, 2 or 3 of the same damn album, like one to listen to, one to slap, like whatever. I'm like, okay, they were already big and space consuming, but let's just have more,
Yeah, absolutely. That's how I started AAGS. I got back into vinyl, and I couldn't find anyone to, third-party grade my records, because I was looking for some of the more expensive stuff online, and I kept, receiving the item. It was either wrong, that like not described properly, or it was in way worse condition than it was described. Half of these people, don't care about a saw cut or a hole drill, or a drill hole or whatever. And, so I was getting very frustrated, and that's how I started things up. But I am very much a listener first. And the same motto. So we have a motto here is, buy one to grab and one to slab. And, the one to grab for me in particular is I always seek out, I have probably 5 of an album that I really am into, maybe even more, because I'm looking for the sound quality. I want that if it's the one I'm listening to, I want the best sound quality possible, or there's something about different versions that I really appreciate the sound quality for. But then when I go to get one to slab, I'm getting that, the most scarce, most rare, the cleanest, most perfect copy I can find, and then getting that one slabbed. So, it's cool. I was interested to hear how you started. Yeah.
What going back to your sub, if you don't mind going through some of the other ones. So one of the albums on there, I'll say less iconic than the ones we've mentioned, but super collectible, something definitely from our youth, our generation, was the Tool Undertow album. I've seen a few of those, but you have one. I don't have one. It's also on my want list, but I've never seen one with the cover. I don't know what it is with that cover, probably because it's all black, but the material that they used is super condition sensitive. Every single one I've seen has a lot of creases, not in the best condition. No offense, Butch. That it's like, yours looked like it was like factory fresh. I don't know if you remember where you got it or any backstory on that that's worth. I
was picking that one out for a while. There's actually 2 really early versions of Undertow, and one of them is the clear vinyl, and one of them's like a gray. And I can't remember which is which, but one is retail and one was promotional only, where it's printed on the label. I was looking for both. I only have the clear so far, but I found this guy who had it, and I think he was in Australia. And I'm like, I'm really kind of iffy about buying it from a guy, that far away, taking his word for the condition or whatever. But he sent me this video of him, doing all of the 180, 360 degree. Here's, every corner, every inch of the album. He showed it all to me. I'm like, okay, I trust this guy. And it ended up being a really, really beautiful copy. And the original vinyl pressing, I don't think you mentioned this part, but everybody knows the red, it's like a sort of like a artsy rib cage sort of thing. The CD was always red. That's what I saw first when I heard of Tool, because obviously 93, you're listening to CDs. The vinyl release, it's actually got a black gray monochrome thing going on, which makes it stand out that much more. But the fact that the vinyl is either clear or gray, again, that's what I love about the hinged case. I want to see it, I want to see the color of the vinyl. So, that album's pretty cool. I need to find a gray one now.
Tool stuff is so collectible. They have kind of a cult fan base.
They don't re-release a lot of stuff.
Yeah, they don't release anything, and they have a huge like a cult following almost.
And
of
Anima
fans.
is really tough on vinyl too. The first pressing of Anima, I mean, they pressed it once, super low quantity, and they never went back, And so I actually do have a sealed copy of Anima as well, and it's got a price sticker on the back right-hand corner that is dated the week of the release of the album. So I'm like, okay, that's pretty cool.
Opiate, their EP before Undertow, was one of the first vinyl things I bought when I started collecting. And it is another one of those where you can't tell the repressing from the original pressing. The barcode even is exactly the same, even from
oddly enough,
2013.
that's the one that they've actually kept in press all this time. It's weird. Why don't they re-release Anima, and why is Opiate still available?
Right. And I believe the original Opiate, which I never opened it, so I don't think mine is. I believe that has a there's something special about the vinyl. It either goes into out, or it's got a locked groove that keeps playing. I can't remember what it is. Or no, I think it actually has two separate grooves. You can put it down, and depending on where you put it down, it plays a different song.
It sounds like you're talking all about that Lazaretto.
Right. Very similar, yeah. But Opiate does that too. Yeah, so that's cool. The original Opiate does, or Opiate. I don't know how it's pronounced.
I have a Jack White story for you because you talked about him in a previous episode.
Yep.
And also earlier we mentioned the Butcher cover, right? So I guess it was about 4 years ago when the Raconteurs had just come out they were about to come out with their new album, Help Me Stranger, right? Living in Nashville, Jack White's here too. He's a big collector. At his core of cores, he is a collector. He understands it. And so one day I take my assistant out for lunch, and then we're on the way back, and I'm like, let's stop at this little record store, a little place called Allison's that's in the strip mall. It's not like in a busy area at all. It's like 2:30 on a Tuesday. We go in, and you walk in the door, and right in front is the new arrivals bin, and that's what I'm digging through. And she's like further down the aisle, and we're the only two people in the store, little small place. And she comes up to me, and she's like showing me this Joan Baez album. And I'm like, why are you showing me this Joan Baez album? I like, what is going on? And she's like pointing across the room, and I look up, and Jack White's standing there. I'm like, oh my God. My heart starts racing. I am a huge Jack White fan. And that particular time, I was an even bigger Jack White fan. I was consuming it all. And I was like losing it. And so I'm like looking through the bins to get something for him to sign. But and I did find something, and I went up and talked to him for a minute, and he was super nice. But it was funny. I overheard him talking to the shop owner about the fact that he owns sealed copies of both mono and stereo Butcher covers. I'm like, okay, that's really interesting. Whatever. As a collector, that's cool. And I go up to him and I tell him that I have tickets to see him in a couple of months. And you may not be aware of this, but at one point in time, he produced his own baseball card. You could go to Topps and have like a custom card made. And he had a couple hundred of these baseball cards where it's like the 1982 Topps baseball card design. And it's a Jack White card. And of course, his number is 3 and whatever. But the only way you could ever get that from him is if you met him in public and asked him for one. But this was years ago. Like he did this like in 2015 or whatever. So I asked him if he had a baseball card, and he said, "Oh, I don't think I do, but I'll look." And he pulls out his wallet, starts rifling through it. He's like, "I'm sorry, I don't have any more baseball cards, but I have this picture of my mom from high school." And I'm like, "Okay, that's cool, I guess. Thank you." And he was super nice. But the funny thing is, a couple weeks later, when the Raconteurs album came out, there was the Vault Club edition of Help a Stranger. And, recalling the conversation that we had where he was mentioning the sealed copies of the Butcher cover, the Vault version of that album has a lenticular cover on the front.
Mm-hmm.
Now, somebody, I don't know who does this, but I guess because Jack White is such a consummate collector, people are always looking for things. Somebody peeled the lenticular cover off and beneath it was a recreation of the Butcher cover with the Raconteurs heads superimposed over the Beatles.
No kidding. That's awesome.
Yeah. And I'm like, okay.
Do we talk about that?
We didn't talk full circle, and
no, we didn't talk about that. That'll be in Jack White episode, B.
Yeah.
They do so much cool stuff like that.
Yeah.
You might not
historian too.
I knew about the upholsterers and the fact that they were hiding them in sofas and stuff. Like,
that's so cool.
You might not believe this is true, but I actually own a 1982 Topps Chad Brayman. Actually, I could go find it. Yeah, I got someone for some reason for a Secret Santa a couple years ago made 1982 Topps Chad Brayman cards and handed them out. And I
do you have to meet him in person to get one?
No, apparently he was just giving them out, and I don't know. Hopefully someday they're worth as much as the Jack White 1982 Topps. But yeah, I actually own a 1982 Topps Chad Brayman.
I'll sign that for you, Butch.
All right, good. I'll send that up to PSA for sure.
Oh, cool. Well, all
right,
go ahead.
Yeah, no, Drew, do you want to wrap it up? We're over. Over an hour, so try to keep them listenable.
Court, do you have anything? Is there anything else you wanted to discuss or add or talk about?
Oh, you know how I feel about price stickers.
Yeah. So
I think it's a good topic.
It's a good topic. Let's. I don't know if you have time. But hopefully,
we can do it
I could edit it down.
Yeah. If you don't mind, let's talk about it because that's. So there's two areas as we're grading that we've gotten feedback on that seems to be consistent. Third-party stickers. Well, I wouldn't say consistent. I'd say it's maybe 50-50 where there's two camps. The price stickers. Which I see the value in the charm. And then the other one is saw cuts and hole punches, which I just can't. Me personally, to me that's just damage, and it's. I think there's less of a conversation to have there, and I think the four of us anyway are all in agreement on what that is. I think the sticker conversation has more of a debate, but let's but you articulated it better than me on why.
I think so. Kind of 90% of our job is the appreciation, preservation, or authentication of the albums. But there is an attempt in our view of trying to be never gray and always black and white to avoid things that might create controversy or problems later. And one of those would be stickers that are added to the album that are not part of the album process, but were instead added by a third party. And it gets to the point where our ability to authenticate the sticker and say that it was really a Kmart sticker from 1977 versus someone just put a sticker on there, say to cover up damage, which is certainly, maybe it might not happen now, but as albums become more possible. So part of our thinking has been, and this has been just from kind of being students of PSA and students of CGC and students of, and seeing where certain companies got in trouble, where they didn't. And we have kind of been from the start, trying to take steps as much as possible to try to avoid getting into situations where someone could try funny business to get one over on us. That's one thing. And the other thing is, we decided that, it is true that someone could put a price tag on something from 1985, but someone also could just take a price tag gun and put it and say 1985 and put it on there because there's a big scratch in their seal and they just want to cover it up. And how would we ever know that? And how would we know that it's really from 1985 versus someone just put it on there? And how do we know that Kmart put it on there versus someone didn't otherwise put it on there? And I know that's kind of true of everything. I mean, I guess someone, in the finding of counterfeits, which is going to pop up, we're going to have to deal with that with hype stickers and albums and covers. But it was just one extra thing that we felt like, can we allow someone just to put a sticker on something and not take off for the fact that the sticker is there, it seemed to us to open up a can of worms that was ultimately problematic in our ability to always be objectively definitive. And as we kind of discussed before, always be right, rather than saying, well, this is probably from Kmart. Okay.
And it goes even one step further if it's an opened album. Now, it's one thing if it's a sealed shrink, but if it's, obviously we'd have to analyze to see if the shrink is authentic or not. But we had that one submission where there was a fake butcher cover sent in. The sleeve was obviously fake. It had no texture. It was shiny, glossy. But the counterfeiter actually slipped the shrink over the sleeve with an authentic Sears and Roebuck sticker on it to make it look more authentic. And so, the sticker was authentic. The shrink and the sticker did not belong to that sleeve. So, we're not in the business to authenticate, Sears and Roebuck's price tags. That makes it a little bit more difficult and less reliable as far as using it as a touchstone as to its authenticity. Now with those price tag guns, I could buy one on Amazon and set it to say 1985, January 15th, and then put a price on it and then slap it on. So I always recommend to try to get those price tags off, and they're, usually bright orange and they're an eyesore and they don't have a store name on it or anything like that. I would be a little bit, and this is, there's a little bit of a gray area here because we kind of have a disagreement. We're not all on the same page internally, but, when I grew up with a Waxy Maxie's store, I would love to find a sealed Waxy Maxie price tag on a record that I really enjoy. But I don't know if I'm pretty sure I would be okay with it having a lesser grade because that Waxy Maxie sticker's on there. Knowing that it's not permanent and that we can remove it, I have a little, I don't see it as damage. I see it more as something that is a third-party fixture that is on the shrink.
So, yeah, and I'll just add one thing, and then let Court give his thoughts on it. But one thing, and we talked about this really at length because it wasn't unanimous, like Drew said, and the point we actually softened a bit on it, and our rubric reflects it. I think when we first wrote the rubric, we were much harsher on third-party stickers, and now I think it's an element of the shrink that would get it. That one element of the shrink subgrade, I think the max is a 7. But if everything else on the shrink is perfect, you can still see shrink grades higher than a 7, an 8, or if everything's perfect and there's one small sticker, it's just something that is going to bring it down slightly, only because if you have two, one with a sticker, one without, and if there's 50% of the people don't like stickers, in our minds we're like, we don't want to put a 10 on something if there's something that's quote unquote better, or like without a sticker. If we didn't see them as like the exact same. So that was sort of our thought process, but I see both sides of the argument, and it's certainly, I think, a good discussion to have. So, Court, what are your thoughts on that?
All right, I made a few notes, so just indulge me.
He's ready. His guns are loaded.
Okay. I think that, first of all, albums were always meant to be priced. They were meant for retail sale, and so the vast majority of albums are most likely going to have a sticker on them unless it's already been removed in some form or fashion. Stickers can be very, very helpful to actually date an album. One example, I have a Doors self-titled stereo pressing, and the mono of that album is very easily identified as a first pressing, but the stereo is a bit trickier. And yet my stereo copy has a Unimart price sticker on it, and Unimart was a chain in the California area that coincidentally went out of business a couple months after that album was released. So that price sticker is one of the best ways to say, okay, clearly this is a first pressing, because the store didn't even exist, more than 3 months after the album was released. So that can be useful. And obviously, like if you once you get further into record collecting, you start to understand what the retail prices were for a certain time period. Okay, well, this is probably from the mid 60s because it's $5 or $6 or whatever. And, on and on and on. If you find a copy of an early Beatles album and the price sticker is $10, it's not a first pressing. Right. They weren't charging $10 back then.
Right.
So I think it can be useful in the same way that a hype sticker can be useful. Another thing that I've seen in other collectibles avenues is like a copy that has made it through like the retail distribution chain or whatnot can often be considered more desirable than what may or may not be like a warehouse surplus copy. If you find a warehouse copy of Nirvana Nevermind and it's still sealed, it's probably in pretty damn good shape. It's been sitting on a shelf and never touched by anybody. And it's obviously not going to have a price sticker on it. If you have a copy that was shipped from the printing plant to the distributor, from the distributor to the retailer, and then some 15 or 16-year-old kid is handling it and stickering it and tossing it in a bin, and then you buy it and then get it home and it's still in amazing shape, that thing went through an ordeal to get to you. So I think there's an element of authenticity from being like, okay, this is cool. I can tell that this album came from this store. I'll give you another example. I have a copy of Sgt. Pepper's, which came out in '67. And the copy that I have has a retail store sticker on it from a shop in San Francisco. So we're talking about San Francisco, 1967, Summer of Love. I think that adds something to it. I think, okay, wow, that's really cool. This was in the middle of it all when it all went down. So I think there's a certain charm to it. I was watching the Heritage auctions over the weekend, and one of the auctioneers actually was like, pontificating about how awesome the price sticker was on a certain album or whatever. I'm like, okay, that's interesting. He's like, oh, look at this, blah, blah, blah. But I understand the concern over, yes, they could obviously be trying to cover a defect if it's a forged sticker or whatever, or covering a hole, or trying to backdate an album that's not truly vintage. And obviously the little peel away neon stickers where you can set the date and the price, that's going to be probably the most likely scenario for that type of thing. But you're also always on the lookout for, a counterfeited album like the Butcher cover where it's glossy and doesn't have any texture, is a dead giveaway. I mean, there's a lot of counterfeits in record collecting. But to your point about, I think it was Butch that said, you try to be as black and white about grading as humanly possible and not subjective. I think price stickers are extremely subjective. I think there are price stickers that someone might think adds value, like a couple of the examples that I gave you. And I think there are price stickers that completely detract from the album. I saw a copy of Rumors that was listed as a first pressing, but it had a barcoded price sticker on it. Well, guess what? Those didn't exist when it was a first pressing. Yeah. So it's not a first pressing. I've seen sales stickers that are these giant orange ovals, and they slap it right on the middle of the art. And I'm like, I don't want that. Like, it's covering up the art. It detracts from the album. But I think it's completely subjective, and grading is a very technical, objective thing. Does it have this? Does it not have that? And so, in comic books, if a comic book has a price stamp on it or a penciled arrival date, which is extremely common for decades, CGC treats it like it's just not there. They just ignore it. make your own decision. Does that date stamp bother you? Does the penciled mark bother you, or does it add charm for you? And as a buyer, you can make those distinctions. But I think when you're assessing the technical grade of something, I really think it should just be ignored.
Right. So PSA goes a different way. PSA, if you send a pack in that has a price sticker on it, it can't get higher than a 7, because their opinion is there's packs out there that don't have price stickers on them, and why would someone want the one with the price? And I guess I totally understand everything you're saying, and I almost kind of hear everything you're saying, and almost kind of come to the slightly opposite conclusion that it is so subjective that if someone loves the price sticker, they can buy the album with the price sticker on it, and then they get the album with the price sticker on it, and they say, this album is, to me, better than a 9. It's a 7, it's graded as an 8. I think it's a 10 because it has this price sticker of, I don't know, the store I grew up with. And it puts the subjectivity on the consumer instead of on the grader. Whereas we're trying not to be subjective. We're trying to be I mean, it's similar to the idea, and there is some subjectivity. There is some eye appeal that we consider, and all grading companies consider. But if you were, or if someone is grading a Bob Marley legend, it's got his face on it, and someone stuck a sticker right over his face, how do we say? How do we objectively tell someone that that's only a 7 because the sticker should have been over in the corner and not on his face? It's just, and I'm not saying that's impossible. It's probably is possible. It becomes stickier when the subjectivity falls.
Pun intended.
Say stickier.
Yeah.
Is that what you just said?
Pun intended. I do think again, I see both sides of both camps here, and it's not a, I don't know if there is a right or wrong answer. Where we are right now, though, if we think about it, the overall impact to the overall grade is minimal. If we're talking that it is a fraction of just the seal grade, and then the seal is a fraction of the overall grade, it is, and the difference between the seal, because in our grading system, stickers would only impact the seal grade unless it's actually on the cover. But if it's on the shrink and it's still, I think an album could still end up as a 9, or even maybe even, I don't know.
We just had one.
9. Yeah.
Yeah, we just had one.
Yeah,
it had an aftermarket sticker, and it was like basically otherwise really great. I think it ended up being a 9. It was a 1970s album too. I just did it the other day. I think it was a Beatles album. Court, I actually have kind of related to this, but I'm actually wondering your opinion. What is because we've thrown this around too, and I know CGC does this, and I know PSA used to do it, but they decided to get rid of it because they decided that they found that customers actually didn't even like it. What is your stance on qualifiers on albums, or not on albums, on collectibles? So PSA used to say, well, I'll give you a 7 on this, or you can have a 9 off center, or you can have a 9 miscut. And I know CGC has a bunch of qualifier labels where basically they have a million different labels of all various qualifiers. We have thrown that around, but then we kind of looked at the way PSA did it, and PSA found that the qualifier itself became such a detriment to the grade that they just completely got rid of qualifiers. Nobody wanted the qualifier. They'd rather have a 7 no qualifier than a 9 qualifier, and they just kind of got rid of it. So I was wondering what your thoughts are on qualifiers, because we've thrown that around for a 9 third-party sticker.
With saw cuts too. We thought about that.
Saw cuts and hole punches. Yeah.
What, as a collector, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I always understood as a card collector that qualifier was basically a full 2-point downgrade.
Right.
But the fact that they're basically saying there's this one defect that's so glaringly bad that we're going to say, well, I mean, it could have been nicer. Like, yeah, I understand why there was backlash to that. I wouldn't touch qualifiers. I would just say this is what the numerical grade is. And people have eyes, they can see what's going on. Like if you have a 52 Topps Mantle that's wickedly off center, it's going to be obvious. And that's why a PSA 1 that's centered sells for a hell of a lot more than a PSA 1 that's not centered. My only other comment on the price sticker thing, like I understand what you're saying, but as a consumer, I can judge the price stickers. Like, there are price stickers that I see where I'm like, okay, that's a gold star. I want this album because of the price sticker. And the Doors album is an example of that. That legitimizes this first pressing. I'll pay more for it. There are price stickers that are sort of, neither here nor there. It's fine. It's nice. It's there. It's not obtrusive in any way. It doesn't really add or detract. I'm happy to have it. It's fine. I'll leave it alone. There are price stickers that are garish, ugly, misplaced. I'll probably end up just removing them myself. Obviously they're in the way, and then I won't buy it at all, or I'll pay less for it. But I will say this, as a consumer who grades a lot, and condition matters and all of that. And that's another thing I would say to someone new coming into the space, like condition matters. Pay up for the best you can afford. Don't just, if you want to trade up later, fine, but don't settle. But as a consumer, as I'm looking at grading options, if I have an album with a price sticker that I like, and there's one company that automatically detracts for it, and there's one company that doesn't, then I'm going to send it to the company that doesn't. That's just, I'll take the higher number grade because I appreciate the price sticker. And so I don't think it's really black and white. I think it's completely subjective, and I wouldn't take that away from the consumer.
That's good point.
Yeah, very fair. Very fair.
Hot topic. It sounds like
it can be.
and like I said, the four of us we've had the debate. We'll probably still have the debate, and it is not. There's no unanimous. We all think we all see both sides of the argument. For now, we have a slight. It is a slight detriment to the overall seal grade. But we'll see. We'll see how things evolve.
Yeah,
and I think we appreciate the conversation about it. So thank you for that. But I think the fact that it's split like that is just another reason why I wouldn't want to be the one making that judgment. If you're just saying, this album has a price sticker on it, judge it for yourself, then the people that don't like them are going to obviously not want to pay as much for it. And the people that love them are going to go after it. So I don't know why that would affect a numerical grade, because if it's split 50-50 and there are pros and there are cons and there's no clear-cut right answer, then I honestly feel like you're just better off staying away from it. Because what you're doing by downgrading it is saying, okay, we're not downgrading it that much, but we are downgrading it. So we're saying definitively this is a negative.
I think our thought was, or how we ended up landing on where we ended up was, if you have two absolute perfect albums, one with a sticker and one without a sticker, both are 10s, both would be otherwise 10s. And if there are people in the market that don't like stickers, the one without the sticker would be more desirable than the one with the sticker. So they're not the same. There is a segment of the population that would not want the one with the sticker. So we wanted to have ever so slightly differentiate between the two. That's, I think, ultimately how we landed on that. That we can't just ignore it entirely. We didn't think that was the right thing to do, even though, and Drew keeps bringing the point up that it is in most cases not permanent. So while a saw cut or a hole punch you can't fix, a sticker if it's a 10 or if it's a 9.5 or whatever, you could always remove the sticker and it would be and not impact the condition of the album or bring it back to where it was without the sticker. So I see that, it's.
But to your point, like with the Sgt. Pepper's that has the Summer of Love shop sticker on it, I mean, I would potentially pay more for that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's exactly why I'm saying it's so subjective. Like, yes, there's probably a collector out there. No, I mean, there absolutely is a collector out there who's going to want the version of that album that doesn't have the price sticker. Right. And there's absolutely a collector out there, this guy, who wants the price sticker on there. So that's why I would say just grade them both whatever and let the consumer decide.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think
admittedly, I'm particularly conservative regarding ever like making a mistake. Like our goal is to be as repeatable and have the least, chance that something can be questioned. And I guess we're kind of hesitant to add our subjectivity into an objective grading. And then the other thing would be, it only takes one or two wrong graded things to really impact the integrity of your business. And so I do worry that if, there's two copies of, I don't know, I'm looking Back in Black, and one doesn't have a sticker on it. And then another guy just sticks a sticker on it and sends it to us. Well, those really aren't the same. I can't tell where that sticker came from. I can't really grade those the same. Somebody damaged it by sticking a sticker on it. And I don't know if that was the store that damaged it, or he damaged it, or his kid damaged it, or who damaged it. I just know that sticker was never supposed to be there when the album was sent out. So how can I grade that album as well as the other one when some guy stuck a sticker on it? I mean, that he damaged the album. And I don't know who did it. And because I don't know his local record store, he could have just done it today and stuck it on there. How can I not count that as damage? Like, how can I can't really just ignore that. To me, if somebody likes that sticker, they can decide to like it, but I don't know that I can ignore that sticker.
I think the difference between your example about the baseball card packs is that baseball card packs were never actually intended to be individually priced. There was normally a price on the box that indicated the pack price, which is why that's sort of an outlier, but records were always intended to be priced for sale.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I would say, Butch, if there was ever a sealed 10 album with a Looney Tunes price sticker on it, Looney Tunes was our local record store when we were growing up. Butch and I would definitely bid each other up on that. That might break records for a 10 sale.
I'm interested to see what the VHS people do, because I saw a Back to the Future the other day that was sold, and it had a gaudy, awful price sticker on it. I mean, you couldn't even see the cover, and it was graded like 9.8. And I looked at it, I said, I cannot believe they would how could they grade the seal or even the cover with that? The sticker was covering the entire thing. And I was wondering, how the heck did they grade that cover?
Then what you can see, and then I think the sticker is just basically like the unknown, right? Like, we all see the sticker, we all know it's there. You decide whether it you just have to judge it for yourself. I mean, it could be fake. Yeah, it could be covering a defect. Yeah, it could be completely original and cool as hell. I mean, that's why I think, like, if you just grade the structure of the item, allow your consumer, like, give your consumers enough credit that they can make that decision on their own, I guess. And I know that the video game people just ignore the stickers, and the comic book people ignore the date stamps or whatever. I just think I don't know.
Yeah, it's definitely tricky. Yeah. And there's also like degrees of price stickers. There's the really cool vintage ones with a store name that actually look cool to me anyway. I'm more in course camp. I like the way some old vintage stickers look. Mm-hmm. but they could also have that sticker and it's all dirty and wrinkled and it's missing a corner. And in that case, the actual sticker is damaged and it distracts from my appeal. I think the old cool vintage stickers are cool. I think the sticker gun ones are distracting a little bit. So I have a little bit different opinion than the other guys. I'm more of a fan of some of the old vintage stickers, especially if they really pop and they're clean.
I completely agree on the damaged stickers are the ones that are covering the art. I mean, all of it. I mean, yes, there are plenty of stickers that are complete detractors, but that's probably why I would just want to steer clear of it entirely, because like you have enough on your plate just being able to grade the shrink and the integrity of the album cover and all of that, right? Like that's plenty. That's what people are paying for. You're doing a second job by grading a sticker, but then you're also adding your subjectivity about, well, how do I feel about the sticker? And that's really where the buyer, I feel, comes in. But yeah, I mean, thanks for having the conversation with me anyway.
No, absolutely. Yeah. And this is how we refine things over time.
Yeah.
You know,
nothing's
always
set in stone.
Yeah.
It's always something in progress for sure.
Yep. And we also make sticker removal an option. We don't insist on it, and so I think that's another useful service. If you have that ugly sticker that you want removed, we could do it. Well, Court, this was a great conversation.
Yeah,
I really appreciate you spending the time coming with us, talking to us about collecting, the pluses and the minuses. And I think that because we're so early in the market, things are, still settling and buyers are still trying to figure out what's going on. And even us graders are trying to make sure that we're doing the right thing for the hobby. So we really appreciate the conversation and your input on things and your perspective. So thank you for joining us for this episode. We like to give a special shout out to Jake Harwood of Element 88 for the intro and outro music. We really appreciate that, and we look forward to seeing everybody on the next episode. This is Vintage Media Grading, the podcast, signing off.